Good.
Well, Bob, this is such a treat. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
You have had such an incredible career, and I don't know the half of it. So I'm excited to learn more about it today.
That's a tall task that you're putting in front of me.
You're a legend, clearly, by virtue of this bobblehead in real estate. But how did you ever get started in real estate?
So my best friend in life is a gentleman by the name of Sam DeLisi, who actually ran property management for about half of the U.S. for CBRE.
Okay.
His journey started in a residential firm, which is where I cut my teeth and got my license.
Oh, residential.
Residential.
Okay.
But I was actually in the car business back then.
Really?
Right? Selling cars, and I'd come out of the service end, and ultimately ended up, running a Subaru dealership, and I was a truck manager, but I know that wasn't my future, right? I just knew it wasn't, and it was back in the late 70s, early 80s when interest rates were in the high teens, low 20s. Sam had to close his business, and he got a job in property management. And I think, maybe a year into it, he suggested to me, you might want to consider office leasing. And, you're a very good salesperson. You've got your real estate license. I think you could just kill it. And, I didn't put a lot of thought into it. I interviewed with his firm.
Which was?
Strobeck Reese and Company.
Okay.
And, it was, what a lot of people would call a blue blood firm, right? A lot of wealthy individuals were involved in it. And, I'm proud to say I grew up on the south side of Chicago. We all carry a great work ethic and a little chip on our shoulder.
Sure.
My dad drove a truck for the same company for 38 years. Gifted me a tremendous work ethic. My mother, who was very influential in my life, who was a 100% Lithuanian, they were very proud people. She pushed me. She pushed me relentlessly. And
Did you have siblings?
I have an older sister that I'm not all that close with. I mean, I love her dearly because she's my sister. But I also think we were born far enough apart that there really wasn't a connection. We grew up differently from that standpoint.
Interesting.
Yeah, so ostensibly second child, but also an only child, right? Much like my sister was.
How far apart?
8 years.
Oh, yeah, that's significant.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting. So many people tell me about, successful people that I've had the chance to interview. It's amazing how many people talk about their mother being a significant role in that. So how did she push you?
Well, I mean, I
physically, the way you laugh.
No. I mean, look, I had to come to terms with at one point in my life that if you wanted it to be perfect, I was your guy. You'd get it a week from now, and it would be irrelevant because good is good enough most times, and I don't mean to suggest that everyone should put in a half measure. But she was a taskmaster. One of the stories that I tell that I think is hysterical, and I'll probably get the dates wrong, but I want to say by the time I was, I'd say 4, but let's say 5 or 6, she would give me the Reader's Digest and ask me to memorize the definitions for the words for the month.
Oh, funny.
Right? And so, that's crazy. I learned to read at an early age, and there was a lot expected of me. And I when that's ingrained in your mind when you're young, you just expect that you're going to do that. And the other funny piece, which I can certainly talk about more, which I will tell you, which, you, like most people, would laugh at, is I'm really a numbers nerd and an introvert.
Really?
And
I believe the numbers nerd, but the introvert part I have a little harder time with.
well, think about it, right? It's, we all want our quiet time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with, and I can only say this because other people have said this to me, with the intellect that I had, I sort of felt like a little bit of a weirdo sometimes, right? Because I could do math in my head, but like when it came to talking to people, I'd really rather look at my shoes than make eye contact, and that simply put is anxiety, right? And so I was given the gift of Dale Carnegie sales training because I think because they saw something in me that I wasn't so sure myself. In the book that everyone knows about, How to Win Friends and Influence People, was one of the tools that they used. And, 6 words: who, what, when, where, how, and why.
Okay.
Those were my crutches. I could have a conversation with someone and use those 6 words to have them tell me everything about them. Meanwhile, I was mentally tamping my anxiety down. And I got to the point where I could get comfortable then having conversations, and it became second nature to me. And, people would love to talk to me because I made it easy for them. Meanwhile, I'm terrified on the inside. But ultimately, you get comfortable with that, right?
You get comfortable with the anxiety?
Well, you get comfortable with the anxiety, or you get comfortable with the little games you play,
okay,
and the tools that you use to manage the anxiety. A lot of young people today have anxiety. Well, when I was 18 to 22, I was basically told, suck it up, kid. Be a man.
Right.
And it's treated much differently today, I think, for the benefit of all kids.
Okay.
I mean, my son suffers from it, but, he has his tools now. But for me, and that is sort of one of the other themes to my life. I just gave a presentation on this at the BOMA conference. What they call an Ignite presentation, which is a 5-minute long presentation where you use PowerPoint and you have 20 slides, and they advance the slides every 15 seconds, which is maddening. But the presentation that I gave was to truly be the best version of yourself, you need to become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Oh, very good.
And so, kind of an egghead, I think about a lot of these things a lot. And so, that's how I learned how to push myself. The gift that keeps on giving that I got from my mother. Of course you can do that. Don't ever doubt yourself, right, from that standpoint there. And we all get in our own heads, but she did push me.
And where do you think that anxiety comes from? Is that just a natural thing, or obviously you've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and
I think young people, if they're not mesmerized nowadays by their phones,
electronics,
or electronics, I think they've got an embedded drive that they want to do good for their parents. But I think in this world we're all born with self-doubt.
Yeah.
And I think it's worse for the younger people today because everyone sees the amazing lives everyone else has on social media, which is unmitigated bullshit.
Right.
Everyone has things that they struggle
100%.
with. Right? So it's just, you asked me, those are my thoughts.
I always think that, there's some message that you get sent at a young age that just says, if I could just do this, everything's going to be fine forever,
Right.
And I think the earlier that you understand that life is just full of like one thing after another, Jen and I talk about this, but, it's really how you cope with those things, how you deal with those things, because if you think if this just happens, or if I get this, or I do that, everything's going to be easy from then on out. I mean, that's just not life.
Right.
And so you've really done an amazing job. I mean, because I would never have guessed that you would, I mean, ever, struggle.
But
with something like that.
I don't use it as a crutch.
No.
And the interesting thing is the foundation that I got from my mom and my dad was to always pay it forward.
I love
right.
that.
So
You do that.
If I never made another dollar, but I could help 6 to 10 people every year in some way, shape, or form, that would be payment enough for me at this point in my life.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
So you get your first office leasing job. Who's there to help you learn this business?
Really no one.
Okay, here's a book and a phone.
Right, and there used to be the law bulletin. Leasing guide came out twice a year.
Really?
And it gave all the stats on the buildings. It was like 20 listings a page, and the information, and the direction we were given is to, create a farm with a 2-block by 2-block square area. Now, keep in mind, I'm working in downtown Chicago.
Right.
And like if you just worked that and circled through and continued to follow up and became the expert in that area, you could do really, really well for yourself. And so, that was it. It was cold calling. It was cold calling in the early 80s, where you took the elevator up, you put your lists together, you hoped that you didn't get caught by the office of the building.
Yeah,
you
right.
checked to see where the office of the building was first.
Okay.
There were plenty of times when tenants called the office of the building to complain, and one of the engineers would show up and take me, down in the freight car and exit me out through the alley entrance to the building.
Wow.
But that's just it was the way it was done. I mean, it was a lot of fun, and you made a game out of it, right? And you really there was not a training session.
I believe that.
I had the Carnegie book. I took the Carnegie sales training, and you just have to have that can-do attitude, where the more no's you get, the closer you get to a yes. It's a numbers game. It's a pure numbers game. You can get better at it. You can get a reputation. Warm calls are a lot more fun than cold calls, but you can get good at cold calls. And, I'll tell you the first big deal I got, which is pretty funny. I was cold calling 208 South LaSalle, and it was the U.S. Steel headquarters in Chicago. They had the Southworks. They probably had 350,000 feet in an old Daniel Burnham building with a light court. And I ended up calling on I can't remember his name now, but he ran the computer service center there. And he let me know that they had too much space, and he gave me the name of the guy in Pittsburgh. Jim Gillespie was his name, who I should call on, and because they were probably going to be looking to sublease the space. And so I remember going back to the office and fiddling around, and finally I picked up the phone and I called him. And 4 rings, and I panicked and I hung up.
Oh, geez.
And so, I gathered my wits, which is funny to think about it now, and I called him back, because I realized all I was doing was trying to close for an appointment. No more, no less.
Right.
I'm doing this for 90 days, and I'm thinking, he's an expert. He's a corporate real estate executive. And in fact, truth be told, we won the business, and I think we won the business because we were young and eager and hardworking and didn't put any challenges in front of ourselves. It was a can-do attitude. We can get this done for you. Here's a marketing plan. Here's your competition. Here's where things that are, we think deals can be, made at, and all the rest of it.
Sure.
Now, truth be told, right? Subleasing assignment.
Oh.
Most brokers would run the other way.
Sure.
The good news is I didn't have the training. I didn't know any better. This was a listing for me to call on other people.
For sure.
With.
That's a
so
tool.
For me, it was this huge win. And when they came to town, we went up against L.J. Sheridan, Cushman and Wakefield. CB at that time, I think, was Caldwell Banker Commercial or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And we won the business because we differentiated ourselves. We were going to work harder and longer and put the energy in. And I think because it was a big sublease assignment, in 1,000 to 3,000 to 7,000 square foot chunks, truth be told, hindsight being 20/20, I think everybody else mailed the presentation in. And, we showed up hungry. And, that wasn't, you didn't have computers back then, really and truly. I mean, proposals were put together with a literal secretary putting together the sheets you asked them to put together.
Like type on a typewriter.
Right, as part of your presentation. Yeah. And so, you didn't want to make a lot of mistakes, and you wanted to put a good presentation book together. So that was, that was the one big win. And the truth of the matter was, I then become more of a people person, and I could talk people into taking free rent as opposed to construction and building it out themselves. It wasn't a very sophisticated approach. There were no tax implications or ramifications or anything like that. It was just a good deal. Save a couple bucks a foot. We'll give you free rent for the TI. We'll give you a little extra free rent. And, we were off to the races. And, the interesting thing is there was a lot of development done in the 80s. And so by the late 80s, early 90s, there was an overhang of office space. And I had created a gift and was known as someone, for lack of a better phrase, I think someone said sublease king, right?
Okay.
Bob can sublease almost anything, and so people were getting opportunities with their clients, which they wanted nothing to do with regard to subleasing, and they were agreeing to, so their client got serviced, partner with me and give me a 75-25 split if I would just do it and do the business. And so the early 90s I consider the commercial real estate depression. They're all a little bit different. Some are a deep recession, some are recessions. I don't really know what to call what we're in right now.
I was going to ask.
Right.
I don't know either, right?
No, they're all similar, but they're all a little bit different. And so an offshoot of that was I was told, Bob can lease anything without TI dollars. Offer people free rent, offer them, interesting concessions, be creative. It's not the world we live in today. I mean, today people want the landlords to spend all the money and they want custom space for their employees.
Yeah, to get them back to the office.
To get them back to the office, right? So it was an interesting time.
And now I know there's a lot of sublease space on the market, but it just feels so different than it used to. And I don't know. I mean, it's very different than when you were subleasing space then, don't you think?
Yes.
I mean, I feel like companies aren't struggling as much, so they're not as aggressive about subleasing their space.
Well, most subleasing is controlled by the CFO or the controller's office. Because of those tax laws that I knew nothing about when I got in the business.
Okay.
If you sublease a piece of space now, you have to write off that portion of the lease, and you can only recognize the revenue then monthly as you receive it. So it has an interesting effect on the financials of a firm. And most firms would probably take a look at that and say, look, we'd rather have this as an expense that, we're going to pay over the next 5 years because we're profitable. It's really not an issue.
Right.
But the $1 million that we're paying in rent over the next 5 years, if we sublease it, we have to recognize the $1 million in expense immediately.
Interesting.
Right? So it's a different world. The other thing, we talk about today, I'm of the opinion, and so the folks at Bob International tease me for being the canary in the coal mine. During COVID, I said, look, things are going to change. And the truth of the matter is, Class B and Class C office space was treated like it was an investable office class when it wasn't. And they continued to make loans on it. And now that we come back and we get companies really doing the right thing, they're operating differently, and they're asking people to come back to work, first 3, then 4, and a lot are talking about 5 days a week now. You can't get promoted if your boss doesn't know you. You can't learn the job if there's not on-the-job training and things along those lines there. But the fact of the matter is probably 30% of the office space there's no longer a use for. I mean, here's the other piece. Take a look at demographics. My demographic. I'm 67 years old.
That's smart.
Right? So at 67, I'm part of the baby boomer generation.
Yeah.
Our generation is twice as large as each of the individual next 3 or 4 generations.
That's fascinating.
So now's a great time to get into the commercial real estate industry because I'm living in the middle of, and so many people my vintage are, the great retirement. Think about it. If my demographic group in that window is such, you wake up one day and it's like, I don't want to work as hard anymore. Or it's time to spend time traveling with, your significant other or your grandkids and stuff like that there. So, I don't think anyone wants to slow down cold turkey. I want to stay active, but I don't want to work 60 hours a week anymore.
Right.
And so, that's a big change. I think the young people that are getting into the industry now are going to have potentially greater careers and greater upward mobility earlier, which I think everyone thinks that they want, right? Sooner rather than later. Look, I get that. I mean, I could say I was brought up differently than that. And so I think it's an interesting and a dynamic time. I think it's all about information, not what the information is, because I think because of the internet, the information's out there. It's what you do with the information. All of these data points, crunching data and figuring out, what's different, what's going to move the needle, and things along those lines there. So.
Interesting. So how long did you do office leasing?
Well, my career was 40 plus years, let's call it, 82, 83 to 2025. So that's a good 42.
But you were but you weren't the leasing agent
no,
forever. How did you transition out of being the leasing agent?
Well, so I was at U.S. Equities from, let's say, 87 to 95, right, in Chicago. And because of my gift of being able to sublease and being able to lease, I mean, give me a work letter and I could, work miracles. I gravitated to being the one person that they wanted to work on every deal to talk about strategy from my perspective. And so it was at U.S. Equities that I acquired the title of head of product leasing or downtown head of product leasing.
Okay.
And I was expected to do that one thing that no broker wants to do, and that is advise but not necessarily get paid for it. I mean, as a broker, you only get paid when you do deals, right?
I know.
And so
that well, yes.
so I gravitated towards that, and so I had a dual role, right? Overseeing the leasing projects and the leasing agents and the training of the leasing agents and what do the proposals look like, because that's the one thing that's going to continue to sell when it sits on someone's desk after you've left, and all the rest of those types of things. And then in late '97, I managed to get myself hired by Compass Management and Leasing, which was an affiliate sister company to Equitable Real Estate Investment Management. And so I was responsible for leasing and marketing for the Midwest for one of the largest insurance companies in North America.
Wow.
That invested a lot of money in large office buildings and developments in that. And we were the sister company that worked for the investment company and the pension fund company. And the interesting thing was, hindsight being 20/20, if I'd have known then what I know now, I would have struck a different deal for myself. But up until that point, I had done almost exclusively third-party leasing, working for clients. And the difference that I made there for Compass was that I treated Equitable Real Estate Investment Management as a partner, a true client. And I think there were some folks at Compass that thought that, well, you're a sister company, the business should be ours. And I tried to take a different approach because I thought it would be refreshing, and it was. And ultimately, Compass and ERE got sold to Lend-Lease.
Oh.
And then Lend-Lease flipped Compass to LaSalle Partners.
Oh.
So I ended up making the cut and staying
Keep
at
track of this.
LaSalle.
This is a
LaSalle
lot.
Partners, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay, so now you're at LaSalle Partners.
Yep.
And how does that change your world?
Well, I'm more of an entrepreneur than a policies and procedures individual. And I think their great claim to fame at that point in time was they were very institutional and very focused on policies and procedures. I'm more of a guidelines person.
Okay.
Don't tell me what to do. Tell me what you want done, and then allow me to freelance.
That makes total sense.
Right. And I think, that's one man's opinion. It's a great firm. I wasn't patient. I wasn't patient, I should say, when I was there. Because of my entrepreneurial nature, they didn't really know what to do with me.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I was one of the original, what they call rangers there, that did business development. Okay. Right? And 1 year they just decided they didn't know how to justify paying for us. And so we still had the responsibilities, but they embedded us back in as director of leasing. I was responsible for then downtown Chicago, and I reported to someone that was Legacy LaSalle.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. All right. So then what?
It wasn't for me.
Yeah.
The 2000, we had a lot of the .com things going on. And so I was restless, and I thought I would do a walkabout and go to work for a tech startup that was in the commercial real estate space. Everyone that I knew from the industry thought I was out of my mind. I thought at the time, which I still believe to some extent today, that we were woefully behind the curve, with regard, I think this is 2000 now, right?
Okay.
To adopting technology and software to make our business more effective. I went to work for a company, incidentally, that LaSalle Partners invested in, called E-Link Communications.
Okay.
By then I'd created a following and had a reputation, and basically E-Link was looking to rent my Rolodex because their business model was fractional T1 to the desktop for $25 a month. And, I took a look at it and I thought, this is a no-brainer. I would pay that for myself.
Sure.
Because not too much earlier than that, you remember that crazy dial tone that computers would make on dial-up when you connected to AOL, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so I thought, I understood what a T1 was, and, so my job was to get access from the building owners that I knew and the property management firms that I knew to get access to the risers. We would pay them rent. We would rent a T1 for the opportunity to sell in the building, and we would give them a cut of the revenue.
Well, that's like really different than what you had been
Right.
doing. And did you like it?
Things always happen, right? The answer is, did I like it? Yes.
Okay.
Because I saw the viability of the business plan.
Sure.
What ended up happening is the regional Bell operating companies and MCI woke up and they started dragging their feet because they thought, well, that should be our business.
Right, makes sense.
So they were, delaying. And so ultimately, E-Link, started to close down regions and ran out of money and had trouble raising money. It was certainly a viable business plan. They got sold to a company on the East Coast, and it was time for me to get back in commercial real estate. In my mind, I was either going to be filthy rich or I was going to learn a ton about what the potential future was for the industry with regard to technology and software. And so I don't regret doing that. The headhunters, the funny thing is, when you're successful in the industry, the headhunters never quit calling. And so I didn't think I would have any trouble transitioning back, except much like you, a lot of my friends thought, you're committing career suicide. You'll never be able to get back in. And it was anything but the truth.
Yeah. Well, you're so good at what you do. So what was your next step?
I called Paul Zeller at Zeller Realty. And
how did you know Paul?
So I had met Paul through someone that I met early in the industry, Jim Guerin. And Jim Guerin had ultimately went to work for him. And, I tried to get them interested in buying a couple of buildings in St. Louis. I saw how the business model worked. When I traveled around for Compass and LaSalle, I'd end up in a city that they were in like this, Minneapolis, and, they'd both be in town, Jim and Paul, and next thing it's like, well, let's go to dinner. And then there's a closed door in the conference room, beforehand. When can we get you to come to work for us? Why don't you want to make some real money, work on the investment side of the business? And, I had talked, when I left LaSalle, I had talked to Paul, but I didn't think the timing was right. And what I mean by that is, people have quirks, right? One of Paul's quirks is he likes to pit people against each other.
Oh, okay.
And the opportunity I would have had would have been to compete for acquisition deals at Zeller with one of the principals there, Mark Volbrecht, who is a dear friend and who was happy when I finally joined the firm. But he was leaving Chicago to go to Indianapolis. And a year later when I called Paul, and Paul said, your timing's perfect. Let's sit down. And it was literally like almost a scene out of Glengarry Glen Ross. We met once and we met a week later, and we sketched out the structure of a deal for me to come to work at Zeller Realty Corporation, like on the back of a napkin.
Wow.
Literally.
Wow.
And, I ended up spending 23 years there.
A good deal for both of you.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. And then you just continued to make your mark on so many communities.
Well, the funny thing is I was always willing to take that extra step and do the things that were pay it forward things. Get involved in the community, get involved in the business community, get involved in the charity community is part of my quote unquote day job. And, that just gave, you've got to be careful, right? Because everyone has an ego. And I did it for myself, of course, but more so for the firm because of the recognition and the honor the firm got because there's no I in we, we're doing those things. It attributed goodwill to the firm as well as to me from that standpoint.
And that's really where your heart is, isn't it? I mean, you've blessed so many people with your wisdom, and you really care about others, and you care about charitable organizations, and you care about community. I mean, that's got to be a big driver in your.
It is
in your DNA.
You think about a lot of different things. I was an early adopter of sustainability. When a lot of my peers would say, "Oh, that's just bullshit. Don't waste your time," right? And the way I thought about it was, I want to leave my children a better world than I found, and this is one of those ways that I think I can do that. And so it was great for the firm because it gave the firm the ability to differentiate itself and how it approached the business. But it helped me as well. I just, I always knew that, so many people that you deal with out there, their egos are fragile. It's about the we, it's never about the I. Because when it becomes about the I, it becomes problematic for people to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice. Well, you've made some changes in the last just year, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I kind of feel like you're on waivers, or what's a sports terminology where you're like on the open market? You're like
you reach a point where for what's best for the team is for one of their lead players or one of their superstars to move on, and I think it was time for me to move on. You get so caught up in bleeding Zeller blue blood, right? That sometimes you need to take a step back. I'd become a workaholic. I'd work 50, 60 hours a week. I had some things in my life that were in conflict. I was elected the chairman of BOMA International.
Wow.
I became an officer. That was a 4-year term that I was in the process of serving. There were a lot of 20-hour days, serving 2 masters. It was very fulfilling, but I also think it was time to take a pause and rethink what's next for you. So this is where I'll make some statements that will be controversial. Fact of the matter is, at most companies in the commercial real estate industry, there is ageism. There's ageism because they have a queue of employees that they need to make a slot for, and questions start to arise about someone's effectiveness or what have you. You're still the same person, but the queue's too long, and you need to give those younger people their opportunity to spread their wings. And I think that was I've seen it happen time and again. I don't think it's fair, but I think it's fair if the person can take a look at it and reflect, right? So I've said some other things that aren't controversial, but that are forward-leaning, right? I always like to say that I always want to try and be the youngest 67-year-old in the room. Whatever age I am, I want to be the youngest version of that. I think the biggest challenge for us all is that technology is moving faster and faster and faster and faster. And so some of the advice I gave probably 7 or 8 years ago at a commercial real estate conference was that I encouraged everyone that was my vintage at that time to find a 22 to 24-year-old mentor. And you could have heard a pin drop when I said that. But, my thought process is the technology that I struggle with is second nature to these young people.
Because they grew up with it.
They grew up with it, right?
Yeah.
And if there's 6 things you're looking at, right, but the kids are only paying attention to 3 or 4 of them, they can tell you which 2 you don't really need to bother with. And for that benefit, to be, more efficient, more worldly and what have you, could you not just be a mentor to that younger person a little bit, give them some guidance? I mean, if they're like most young people I know, especially my son, they won't listen to us. So it's a bargain worth making, and I say that tongue in cheek.
Sure.
But I think that's that's part of it from that standpoint. So I left Zeller August 16th of last year, and I had a friend who came into town with his family in Chicago for a long weekend, and he said, I know that this is your first Friday unemployed, and he said, I have to meet with you. And he was in the process of starting his own consulting firm, and he said, you've been amazing to me in terms of helping my career. Whatever you do in this next chapter, do not become a ghost for 6 to 12 months. Continue to network.
Okay.
And you're so good at it, and you've got so much to give back. Please, 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 please do that, right? And I'd already made my mind up.
Was that kind of a full circle moment? I mean, if you really think about it, where you started from, where that wasn't your natural gift, to be told,
yes,
kind of in the last chapter of your career maybe, or the next chapter of your career, that's where you excel. I mean, right. Aren't you proud of yourself for that?
Yes, but I also try to not take those things for granted. I also, look, I've got an ego like everybody else, and I will admit that I can be full of myself. I mean, probably 4 or 5 or 6 times maybe in my career, I thought I was hotter shit than I really was, right? But I think remembering where you come from is a good thing. So, but having someone who and you trust tell you, look, you're one of the best at this, and this is an area that you didn't think you were good at. That's me saying that when you got into this business, and now you're like this next level connector. Don't stop doing that. So I did a light sabbatical.
Really cool.
Yes, it was very cool. And I took the advice, and I took the balance of the year, wrote a business plan to start a commercial real estate consulting firm. And because my view was I've got 40 plus years of experience, I'm a unicorn. I'm a one of a kind. I'm sure there's something that isn't working in your organization that you could use my help with. I'm not looking to get married. I'm only looking to date. I just want to be a consultant. I'm not going to be, I don't want to be an employee. You don't have to worry about, oh my God, what kind of baggage do you, bring in here? And it's like, no, I'm bringing my wisdom. Here's my hourly rate. If you buy a bucket of hours, I'll give you a discount. You do not have anybody like me on your staff. And your firm will benefit greatly from me as it relates to my experience and my advice. And that was sort of that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I came up with 30 companies to call on, C-suites, heads of asset management, managing directors, culled the list, and called on none of them.
Say that again?
I culled the list, and then I called on none of them. Because through my other networking that I had been doing along the way, by the middle of January, I had 2 clients, and I had 4 really good prospects, and not necessarily in the places that you would have thought. And, I sit before you here today. I have 8 clients that I can bill time to as a consultant. 2 construction companies, didn't see that one coming. They pursued me because of my network. 4 prop tech companies for the same reasons. And 2 commercial real estate firms who knew me and had identified challenges that they had that they thought my experience might be able to help them with.
That's awesome.
Are
you having fun?
I am having the most fun I've had in a long time.
Oh, I'm so happy.
It's been very, very, very rewarding.
But what a gift to those organizations. I love that there's so many more people now that can take advantage of the knowledge and experience you have.
Well, I don't take that for granted. You're kind to say that, but you reach a point in life where all of a sudden you have a 4-year-old grandson and a 2-year-old granddaughter, and it's like, how much of this do I really want to do, and how much more of it do I need to do? Yeah. So I still have involvement with BOEM International. I'm trying to control the business as opposed to have the business control me. As you know, I recently got married, which is very exciting.
So happy for you! Congratulations!
Yeah, and that is something that I feel blessed to have found a woman that I can partner with, and these latter stages of one's life from that standpoint there. And so I think about it every day and I smile. I think, the only problems I have are first world problems. They're not real problems. They're just matters to be dealt with from that standpoint. So
I love to hear that you're in such a good place.
Yeah.
And you deserve it. You've given so much to so many.
Appreciate
and you'll continue to do that.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of challenges and questions in the office space world, and to have you out there as a resource to so many. We're both kind of workaholics, so I understand how hard it is to kind of balance all that but I think the more that you can continue to give and figure out this industry and help the people in it, the better the world will be.
Yeah, we're at an interesting time, that's for sure.
Well, Bob, I am truly honored that you took the time to do this.
Thank you.
I love every bit of advice that you have to offer, and I thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.